All right, welcome to this week's Panther-Lair podcast, our second ever time live streaming the podcast, and it appears, I think, that everything is working as it should be. Got the comment section up and rolling if you want to chime in and have a conversation about Pitt sports as we talk every week. And we'll see how this goes. Week number 2 of doing the live stream here on YouTube. Of course, if you're just listening to the podcast, you want to check out the live stream sometime. We do it on Tuesday nights at 8:30. At least that's the tentative plan. Pitt is they've got a game next week at Florida State on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. So we're still trying to figure out how we're going to work around with that with the live stream. Got a couple ideas. We'll see what we can come up with to make it work. But every Tuesday night, we'll tape the podcast here. We'll tape it on YouTube and do a video podcast, not so you can see me, although that's one of the either unintended benefits or downfalls of this plan, but of this new approach to the podcast. But really, what's interesting to me about doing it this way is that you get a chance to interact. You can get in the comments section here on the live stream and ask questions about Pitt sports or post comments, tell me when I'm being an idiot about something, and there's certainly going to be a lot of opportunities for that, especially if we talk about on-campus stadiums, which we'll try to avoid, but hey, we got to go with the topics du jour, and certainly on Tuesday, that was one of the topics du jour. We're not going to start with that, though. All right, we're going to try to avoid it if we can. I'm going to try to avoid looking at my phone too much if I can. I flipped it upside down, though. That's just not a good idea, because who knows what might come through. Last week, we did the podcast, and I think later that night, Ben Sauls, the kicker, committed, right? Or it became public that he had committed, and so we kind of needed to keep an eye on things because you never know what might come out. So if you're watching the live stream, I apologize when I look down at the phone, but what are you going to do? If you are on the live stream, and even if you're not, if you're just listening to the podcast, you should go to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can get notifications about when we post new content or when the live stream is going live. You know when it's happening. So you should definitely check that out. Of course, you look on the screen, you can see the Panther-Lair.com logo right here below me. Okay? Got headlines up in that corner. I can't really, I'm still getting used to the left and the right, but, and I apologize for people on the podcast. You can't see the fact that I pointed in the wrong direction. We got some headlines there. I got some photos of Pitt basketball, and we're going to talk about Pitt hoops here in a second. Of course, as we do during the podcast on Tuesday nights, and I've been doing this for years, but now you get to actually see it. We have a cold one. And tonight, I'm excited about this. This is a new one. This is New Belgium. And if you have listened to the podcast for a while, you know I like New Belgium a lot. It's one of my favorite breweries. I feel like they've rarely, if ever, and I can't really think of a time off the top of my head when they let me down. They really have never let me down. And you know that one of the ones that we had when we first started having, I wouldn't call them sponsors. It's support. You know, they support the podcast, and we appreciate them for doing so. And when we first started, one of the beers that we really had a lot was Voodoo Ranger. And one of the Voodoo Rangers, I think it was a Guava Spruce double IPA at the time. And Voodoo Ranger is a regular IPA for New Belgium. They have year-round, but then they also do these special one-offs. And I forget, I have a couple new Voodoo Rangers, and I forget if this is the one-off or the new year-round. But this one is Starship IPA. Can you see it in the screen there on the live stream? It's Starship IPA, and I'm going to read off the card here that tells us about it. It's brewed with out-of-this-world galaxy hops. Starship IPA will blast your taste buds with notes of fresh grapefruit and citrus. So let's see. I don't know if my taste buds are being blasted with notes of grapefruit and citrus, but this is delicious. New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Starship IPA. I'm pretty sure you can get that wherever you like to buy your beers. And like we always say, I mean, New Belgium is one of my personal favorites. So appreciate you guys checking them out. They support the podcast. You should support them. And on the live stream, got the comments already coming in. Stashy asked, what's your favorite type of beer? And Stashy, we're not here to talk about beer. I mean, I had just talked a lot about beer, but no, I'll really drink whatever you put in front of me, man. I'm kind of easygoing like that. I do like IPAs a lot, but I also like, brown ales. I get into ciders every now and then. We'll drink whatever somebody wants to give me. But yeah, throw your comments and questions into the comment section there as we talk. And the first thing I wanted to talk about on the podcast this week is a question that I put out on Twitter on, I put it out on Saturday because this was an appropriate time to do it, and got a lot of feedback on Twitter, put it on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And I was like, I'm going to talk about this on the podcast too. I'm going to probably write about it in the 321 column because it's a question that I just can't seem to answer. And it's about Justin Champagnie, who obviously has been incredible thus far, and certainly in recent games and really since the ACC schedule started. I got some stats here in a second we can talk about. But he has been outstanding, and obviously against Georgia Tech he was really, really good, 30 points and 9 rebounds. After he scored 20 against Notre Dame, he was the I think the Football or Basketball Writers Association or something, National Freshman of the Week. He was all ACC, all freshmen, Freshman of the Week honors for him, and very much deserved. But I just couldn't help but thinking during that game on Saturday, we always like to compare. This guy is the next so-and-so, or this guy will remind you of so-and-so. I think, pit guards are always going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, for those of us who really kind of got to know this program since the start of this century, you're going to talk about guys in the context of Brandon Knight and Carl Krauser and Levance Fields. If there's a big athletic wing, or not so much big, but if there's an athletic wing who can jump out of the gym and maybe pull up every now and then and hit a shot, you're going to talk about Sam Young. You know what I mean? You're going to talk about, you're going to talk about guys like Gilbert Brown, and for better or for worse. And look, if you have a guy like Chevy Troutman who just cleans up around the glass and shoots like 70%, like Chevy Troutman did in some of his early seasons, I mean, you're gonna make those references because it's a reference point that we all have. We all have that reference point with Pitt football or Pitt basketball that we're going to talk about guys like that. Boy, he reminds you of Nate Peterman, we might say, or boy, he really reminds you of James Conner with that run, that kind of thing. We always do that, and it's natural. I mean, it's what we do in sports in general, and probably what we do in life. I mean, we make comparisons to common reference points, but damn if I can think of a common reference point for Justin Champagnie. I mean, this guy is almost without comparison in recent Pitt years. I mean, who comes to mind when you think of Justin Champagnie? Who's the guy who is a reference point? Who's the comparison point? And we've been having this conversation for a few days now, so you may have already put a lot of thought into it. I know I certainly have, because you go back through teams, this decade, over the last decade, there's not another comparison. There's not a guy you could point to. You get back into the decade before that, really the heyday of Pitt basketball, and I mean, who do you even point to there? And people threw out a lot of different suggestions. One of the first names, when I put the question out on Twitter, one of the first names that people came up with was Jerron Brown. Jerron Brown didn't shoot like Justin Champagnie shoots, and he wasn't as big as Justin Champagnie. This is the thing. It's the combination of the size, the ability around the rim, and then the threat of making a shot from outside. We'll talk about his numbers in a second about shooting from outside. He's only, what is he on the season? 28% or something like that. I have some thoughts on that, and I'll get to it. We got comments coming in. Some people were reacting to this. Krishna says, Talib Zana. I mean, Talib Zana couldn't step out and shoot like Justin Champagnie. He might have made a shot here and there, but I mean, you weren't going to try and run an offense through Talib Zana. Definitely not through his outside shot. Roman, who's been on the podcast a lot, he was on the live stream comments a lot last week, said Donatas Zavakis. And Donatas, okay, he kind of reminds you of that shot from outside, but a couple things. I don't think Champagnie is going to be a 40% three-point shooter. I think he can do better than 28%, and I think he's trending in that direction, but he's not going to be which I think Donatas was, a 40% shooter, and he's also way better around the basket than Donatas ever was. Jack Rossi says he finishes like Nasir Robinson around the rim, but he can also shoot. Yeah, and he's bigger than Nasir too. He's listed 2 inches taller, and I mean, you can say what you want about listed heights and weights. The thing I always say about listed heights and weights is the same thing I always say about attendance. We can talk about, that guy's not really that tall, or he doesn't weigh that much, or they didn't have that many people at a game. And okay, yes, everyone fibs about heights and weights and attendance numbers. But if we can just accept that all those numbers are exaggerated, you know what I mean? If we can accept that all those numbers are not hogwash, but a little bit more than what they really are, you know what I mean? Then we understand it's all on the same scale. You know what I mean? So you say, well, Pitt didn't have 45,000 people at that game. Okay, no. But if it's exaggerated by the same amount that everybody else exaggerates, you know, if heights and weights are exaggerated by the same amount that everybody else exaggerates, then we can say, yeah, Justin Champagnie is 2 inches taller than Nasir Robinson was, you know, or 2 inches taller than Jerron Brown or something like that, because they're all sort of exaggerated the same. And I think, again, that's the thing that I come back to with Champagnie. You know, Josh Newark here on the comments says Champagnie, when he's hot, reminds me of a Ronald Ramon type of shot. I mean, he's not that kind of shooter. He's a good shooter. I think he can be a threat from outside, but he's not that good of a shooter. And then Sam Young. And Sam Young comparison came up a bit. I think he can be a better outside shooter than Sam Young was. But he's not as athletic as Sam Young is. You know what I mean? I think I like what Champagnie can do around the basket. I think he's really good at cleaning things up around the basket. And really, he might be a better rebounder than Sam Young was. Sam Young had a game where he had 0 rebounds. Do you remember that? And Jamie Dixon had to go really far in not criticizing Sam Young when after that game, because he was really good about not criticizing his guys, but it was really hard when he had Sam Young, who's playing the 4, you know, or the 3, and had 0 rebounds in a game. It went really hard. Luca Carroll says Sam Young as well. Champagnie's not as athletic as Sam Young. You know, I mean, he's not going to jump out of the gym the way Sam Young could, and Sam Young was a dynamic scorer because of his athleticism. I think Champagnie's going to get his points and maybe even ultimately average, you know, have a better points per game average than Sam Young. He probably will, because he's averaging 15 a game now as a freshman. And Sam, it took a couple years for him to have that kind of a role in the offense. So I think his stats will end up being better than Sam Young, but I don't think he's not going to get his points in the same way that Sam got them. You know, kind of rolling through the comments, somebody mentioned Michael Young. That's not a bad comparison. I think he's more physical than Mike Young was, but I think Mike Young was probably more physical than we give him credit for. But I think he's more physical than Mike Young was, and maybe can't create his own shot as well as Mike Young did. Josh Newark then chimes in another option from Josh, mentions about Cam Johnson. He's not as good a shooter as Cam Johnson. You know, I mean, I think that's one of the keys, is that he's not. You know, a key distinction between Champagnie and a guy like Cam Johnson is that, yeah, he's got the size, but he's not the shooter that Johnson was. He's also, I think, more physical than Cam Johnson was when he was at Pitt, and I think he's better around the rim. He's a better rebounder, and I think he can finish better. Despite, you know, Monday night, some pretty good video came out of Cam Johnson posterizing a guy. You know, it's not really. You know, that's not his game as much as it is Champagnie's game. And, you know, somebody else just chimed in here, Stephen Case, and I appreciate Stephen's comment. You know, he says, I like the Mike Young comparison. It's the best I've heard so far. Mike Young is a good comparison. You know what I mean? I think maybe the best, if you're going to go over like the last 15 years. You know, I think a lot of people, after we got past the initial sort of Nasir Robinson, Jerron Brown comparisons, occasional Sam Young comparisons, a lot of people started bringing up Ricardo Greer. And I thought Greer was a good comparison. I think Greer is a really interesting one because, you know, you look over his career. Well, I mean, you just look at how Greer played. I mean, he was a big guy. He was athletic. He could shoot, and he could work the glass and finish around the rim, which I think are all the things that Champagnie can do. Greer was about 6'5", 220 is what he was listed at online from what I could find. Sounds about right. He averaged 15 points, 7.6 rebounds. He shot 45.8% and from the field and 27.6% from three. And I give you those numbers as a comparison. So Champagnie, I'm sorry, I said he's averaging 15 a game. He's not. He's averaging 12.6 points per game. So he's a little bit below Greer's pace. Now, Greer, we're talking about his career numbers here, 15 points per game. Champagny is about 2-3 points less per game right now, but he's averaging right around the same rebounds. Greer was 7.6, Champagny 7.3. Greer shot 46% from the floor. Champagny's shooting 44%. And Champagny's currently at 28% from three, whereas Greer was 27.6. So, I mean, very comparable numbers. Roughly the same size. An interesting thing, I think when you look at the three-point shooting from Champagny, one thing that's interesting is if you kind of break the season in half a little bit. Because like the first 11 games, Nicholls State, or not the first 11 games, take Florida State, he was 2 of 5, right? But then the next 11 games, Nicholls State through the Binghamton game, he was 3 of 32 from three. Yeah, 3 of 32. And I think all three came in one game. I think he was like 3 of 11 in one game. And then the rest, is 0 of 29. So he goes 3 of 32 through those 11 games, Binghamton or Nicholls State to Binghamton. After that, the next 12 games since then, Canisius to Georgia Tech, Champagny's hit 19 out of 48. That's 39.6%. In the last 12 games, and he's attempted 48 shots, so it's not a matter of volume. It's not like he hit, 2 out of 4. He's close to a 40% shooter. Or I guess 2 out of 5 will be the comparison. 19 out of 48, 39.6%. He's shooting 40% from three in the last 12 games. He had some rough games in there. He was 1 of 6 against Wake Forest, 0 of 4 against Miami, 1 of 5 against Duke. He didn't take a single shot. He didn't take a single three-pointer, I should say, against Syracuse. I know he had the foul trouble, but he didn't take a single three-pointer against Syracuse. That's a problem. And Roman in the comments asked, Chris, what do you think this team can do better to attack a zone defense? I mean, the biggest thing you can do to attack a zone defense is to make shots. You got to hit shots from outside. I mean, that's a simple answer, but it's the truth. The zone defense works so well against Pitt because it shuts down the biggest strength for Trey McGowan and Xavier Johnson, which is driving. And so if you can't drive, you have to be able to pass well, move the zone, and get the open shot, and then make it. And if Justin Champagny needs to attempt more than 0 three-pointers. The next time they play Syracuse, he's going to have to shoot threes. But, I mean, that's, simple stuff, right? I mean, what do you do to beat a zone? You make shots. You shoot them out of the zone. And then you have to get the rebounds, too, because there should be an advantage that you have. A team that plays zone should have vulnerabilities in rebounding. They shouldn't be as effective. They should be opening themselves up and be vulnerable on the glass. And you've got to be able to take advantage of that. Now, Champagny is an important guy, and I mean, we saw the difference there where he fouls, he gets in foul trouble in the first half against Syracuse, and, the team obviously struggles. He comes back in the second half, plays really well, and gives Pitt a chance, but he doesn't take any three-pointers. So coming back to this matter of the three-point shots, he's got, on the season, 24 made three-pointers, and 19 of them have come in the last 12 games. So my point is that he's shooting better as of late. He's been getting better as a three-point shooter. And I think it's not that he's necessarily made an improvement as much as he's just settled in. He's gotten more comfortable in the game. He's gotten more comfortable on the court. And as he's gotten more comfortable, he's been knocking those shots down. And so, like I say, a 40% three-point shooter over the last 12 games. And so that part of his game, I think, is going to come along. And I don't think he's going to be a 40% career three-point shooter, but I think if he can be in the 30s, if he can be 35, 36%, 33, 34, that's enough of a threat that he's going to be a danger from the outside. What he really needs, if we want to talk about comparison points, he needs to develop that Sam Young pump fake, that Sam Young shot fake. Because if he can hit 35% from three, 38% from three, that shot fake is going to get guys in the air. And if he can develop that and then put it on the floor and dribble and then pull up, for a shorter jump shot or go to the rim, yeah, he's going to be really, really tough to defend. And I think, it's funny because we came into this season and the whole reason for optimism about this team, or one of the biggest reasons for optimism about this team, was Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan. That people were excited to have those guys back as sophomores and excited about what they could become. And then there was this sort of stretch of a couple months there, really, where a lot of that enthusiasm and optimism waned. where people weren't as excited about having Johnson and McGowan's, and they were less excited about the future as a result of those guys struggling. Well, enter Justin Champagnie. And as he has played better and better and better over the last, really in ACC play, he's averaging 13 points per game and 8.3 rebounds per game in Pitt's ACC contests. 13 ACC games, he's averaging 13 points and 8 rebounds. And that 8.3 rebounds per game is like 6th best in the ACC. And he's Pitt's leading scorer in ACC games with 13 points per game. So as he has emerged, I think there's been a new source of optimism, and it's become, I think the opinion has shifted from Johnson and McGowan's got to carry the load for this team to, they've got a real weapon in Justin Champagnie, and that should take pressure off of Johnson and McGowan's, give them more options to spread the ball around, and then you'd like to think that's going to open up opportunities for them to sort of settle in and score with a little more ease, a little less degree of difficulty. If defenses have to pay attention to Justin Champagnie all the time, if they have to get out and defend Champagnie, that should open up opportunities for McGowan's and Johnson. I mean, it's been the best development of the season thus far. Right? There's no question about that. The emergence of Champagnie as a shooter, I think, is probably the biggest surprise. But how comfortable he looks, and this stuck out to me in the Duke game, and I think I talked about it and wrote about it. He looks really comfortable around the rim. He's comfortable getting down there, banging with guys, and going up and grabbing rebounds. You see it too, where he averaged 25 and 10 over the last 2 games. He averages 8.3 rebounds per game in the ACC. He stepped into ACC play, and he's been an effective player. He's physical. He's big. He plays well around the rim, and he can shoot a little bit. Pretty good combination. Let's check out the comments real quick here before we switch off of basketball. Let me see what we got here. Royce Beacom says, will the new guys coming in next year make Champagnie more or less effective? I mean, the more weapons you can add, the more guys you can bring into the roster who can help, that helps everybody. Just like Ryan Murphy's addition to the roster was supposed to help Johnson and McGowan's and give those guys someone to kick the ball out to and open up opportunities for them. Just like Champagnie's emergence should ultimately, even as soon as, over the next, 7 games, 8 games, 7 regular season games plus at least 1 in the ACC tournament, Justin Champagnie's emergence should help Johnson and McGowan's be more comfortable and have more opportunities to score out there. I think you bring in more guys who can help, particularly guys in the front court like John Hugley or Max Madison or Noah Collier, and then you bring in the other guard, Ethiel Horton, the transfer who's been sitting out this year. And I think those guys, again, the more bodies you have, competent players on the court, the better it's going to be for everybody. Who was it? On to Green 19 says, if you could tell Trey and Tony to work on one thing this offseason, what would you tell them? Passing. Probably. If I could pick one thing for all 3 of those guys, it would probably just be passing. No, this isn't a good passing team. And maybe we've all been spoiled. If we watched Pitt through the 2000s and, the early 2010s, I mean, those dudes could pass. Those were really good passing teams. I think one of the biggest reasons they always had success against Syracuse or gave Syracuse so much trouble is they passed so well that the zone just broke down. If it was a guy like Nasir Robinson or whoever it was, Jerome Brown, they were able to have success against that zone because they passed so well. And eventually they found the opening, and they were going to pass and pass and pass until that opening came. And this team either has poor judgment on when to take shots, or they just don't pass that well. And I tend to think it's the latter. And so, certainly Johnson and McGowan's, I would say just work on passing to your team. Just work on passing. And Tony, I don't know, I like Audice Tony's game a lot right now. He can always get better as a shooter, although I think he's done a decent job this season, better than I expected as a shooter. The same thing, just passing. They're developing enough scoring options on this team. They just need to pass. Maybe that's oversimplifying, but that's my thought off the top of my head onto Green 19 is that that's what they need to work on. Matt P. says, is it foolish to fully expect this team to be top 25 next year? Now, I know during games, Capel is being credited for the job he's doing, but I can't imagine next year the national heaps of praise. Should they be top 25 next year? To open the season, that'll depend on how they finish this season. And I'm guessing probably not. I don't think they're going to finish this year in the top 25. And so I doubt that they would start next season in the top 25, but I don't think it's crazy to imagine that this team could get into the top 25 at some point next season. I would agree about that. Scabaloni family says having Ryan Murphy back will probably help attacking the zone in the next games. It will, as long as he takes the shots. I think one thing that stood out to me about Ryan Murphy as the season has gone on is that he hasn't. I think once you got into ACC play, I feel like he hasn't been as able to get his shots and find his shots and get open. You know what I mean? I think it's been harder for him to get open. I think they've tried to run plays for him, and I think it hasn't been as effective because he's going against ACC guards, and I think it's being more difficult. It's become more difficult for him, and I think when he has open shots, he hasn't been as willing to pull the trigger. He needs to be willing to catch and shoot. Anytime he's got an open look at the basket, he needs to be willing to fire. It's simple as that. And so it should help them against the zone. And Roman, who's one of our regular commenters, and he's in the live stream a lot. Roman says, I think getting Murph back will be huge. There have been times the last few games when they needed to get Trey or X out to calm them down, but they just haven't had the bodies. That's a big part of it with Ryan Murphy being out as well. Is that and then when the walk-on, Onye, Easy Akudo, and I apologize for that. I mean, I look at that name all the time, and I apologize for not. I apologize for mispronouncing it. But you lose. You lose Murphy, and that cuts into your guard depth, and then you lose Onye, and it really cuts into your guard depth. Having Murphy back is just going to help in terms of having bodies, and then if you can get him going a little bit, and making shots, taking shots, and knocking them down, that would certainly help the offense for sure. And Royce Beacom kind of asked something along the same lines. The absence of Murphy has added to the effectiveness of Champagnie. I kind of don't think so. I think Champagnie is going to do what he's been doing, whether Ryan Murphy's on the court or not. I think even if Murphy's out there, Champagnie's still going to get these shots that he's been taking. He's still going to get the rebounds too. I think Champagnie I think he's earned the time he's got, and earned the shots he's got. And I think even if you put Ryan Murphy out there, you're still going to want to get the ball to Justin Champagnie. Nick Rowland says, stay on basketball. Signing day's over. The Narduzzi to Michigan State talk is over. No need to go back to football right now as we're deep into basketball season. There's some truth to that, but you know how it is, man. Football and basketball kind of go on all season long. There's basketball stuff to talk about in the summer. There's football stuff to talk about in the winter. But, I guess, Champagnie is the main focus of basketball for me right now. Roman asked about Jeff Capel, some comments on Abdul Kareem Koulibaly, that he plays better in games than he practices. I'm intrigued to see what he develops into. I think it's good that they haven't needed to rely on him this year, that they've been able to go with Terrell Brown and Eric Hamilton. Next year, he's obviously going to have a big role because he's going to be right there with Brown. He's going to be the number 2 center behind Terrell Brown. So, he's going to have a major role on this team next year. And I think he can play. I think he's shown flashes. He's just got to get bigger and stronger and be a part of, be a part of a college strength program for a year and get comfortable with what it's like to play in the ACC, what it's like to play college basketball. 404 Strang, actually, I think you asked this earlier, and I apologize that I missed it because I did want to answer it. Hey, just wondering what your thoughts are on the Oakland Zoo this year and on basketball attendance in general. As a student, I feel like the support is miles ahead of last year already. I agree. I think the Zoo's been great this year. I think, not great during the non-conference, but it's not always. It's not always. It hasn't always been great in the non-conference. You know what I mean? I think even when Pitt basketball was really rolling, the the attendance wasn't great in the non-conference. And so, and that's just natural. But the Zoo, I think, has been really impressive this year. They've been loud. They've turned up in numbers. They're buying back in, I think, some of the hype with Jeff Capel and the excitement that Jeff Capel has created. Regular fans, the adults, the grown-ups, if you want to call them that, they seem to be coming and going. There have been times where I expected the numbers and the attendance to be a little bit better, and there's been times where maybe it surprised me a little bit on how the attendance turned out. They'll get there. They'll come back. They'll come back to this program when it starts succeeding and being nationally relevant, where it's top 15 and top 10 on the reg. And I think it can get back to that point. And if it does, then I think the crowds will become what they once were at the Peterson Event Center. I do think this year is a significant upgrade over last year. I think last year I think Pitt had to atone for the previous 2 seasons, and maybe even further than that. But this year, I think the atonement is done, and now I think people are legitimately buying into the excitement, and I think that particularly includes the students. Josh Newark says, the $1 million question, what accounts for the dramatic difference between dominant Terrell Brown and 0 points fouling out in 2 minutes Terrell Brown? We're never going to have an answer to that question, man. Josh, I honestly don't think we'll ever have an answer to the question of how you can figure out when you're going to have good Terrell Brown and bad Terrell Brown. I mean, at least with Gilbert Brown, you knew it was every other night, right? Every other night he scored in double figures. That was like that one season. Every other night he scored in double figures. So you knew, you almost could predict what you were going to get out of Gilbert Brown. Terrell Brown, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes he's awesome. Sometimes he's really dominant out there and plays like a guy his size and with his ability should be able to play. And then sometimes, man, he just seems checked out. And I'm not going to sit here. I don't want to sit here and question his effort or anything like that. But there are times when he looks like he doesn't want to play. And he's just a non-factor on the court. And then there are times where you say, all right, he came to play. He's out there. He wants it. And I couldn't tell you what the difference is between one and the other. I don't know what it is, I wish I could explain it, but I can't. Luca Carroll says, if we land William Jeffress, how does that affect the current roster? We would need to open an extra spot, right? Well, yeah. So William Jeffress, if you don't know this story, you should probably catch up because this is an important one for Pitt. 4-star forward prospect, wing prospect from Erie McDowell. He's in the 2021 class. So he's a junior in high school, but kind of the worst kept secret in college basketball recruiting became formal or public, I guess, over the weekend. He reclassified from the 2021 class to the 2020 class. And this is a big move for him to go into the 2020 class. He's going to graduate high school early. He's going to leave this year, and he's going to go to a college play for a college in the fall. And he's a young guy. He doesn't turn 17 until June, I think it is. So he's not only graduating early, he's graduating early as a younger early graduate, so to speak. And he's going to go to college in like I say, he'll probably sign in April or the spring signing period. Not early, the late signing period, actually. And Pitt is the favorite. Pitt is considered to be the most likely candidate for his services. If he comes to Pitt, it's going to be really interesting to see how he fits in because I don't know if he projects, we rank him as a 4-star power forward prospect on Rivals.com. I'm not sure if he projects as a power forward, especially when he's going to come in and be, just freshly 17 years old. Like you really... And this is crazy to say, you almost would want to redshirt him. Maybe not almost. You would want to redshirt him because you give him a year to develop and grow physically. And I know he's been dominant at his level. He's averaging like 25 and 10, playing in high school ball, and he's played on the EYBL circuit, and he's USA basketball, and he's done all these things, and he's proved himself at a lot of levels. He's a very good player. Jeff Capel made him a priority from the time he got to Pitt. Capel knew him from the time he was at Duke. He had conversations with William Jeffers on an unofficial visit to Durham. And then when Capel got to Pitt, he reached out to Jeffers almost instantly. I mean, he's been a priority. He's been a priority for William Jeffers from the jump. And he's very good. But a young guy like him, you just wonder how he translates. I mean, is he going to be able to play in the ACC when he's only 17 years old? And I can't rule it out. I think he's really good. But Pitt Parade just chimed in. I like the idea of redshirting William Jeffers, but he's probably in the minority. I mean, yeah, because if they get William Jeffers, they bring him in as a 4-star prospect. People are going to want to see him right away. And if he doesn't play right away, I think fans are going to be disappointed, even if it's the best thing for his development. And Roman, said, do you think he would come here to redshirt? No, I mean, if a guy is leaving high school early, he's probably not going to go to college thinking he's going to redshirt. I mean, there's something to be said for who you practice against, and iron sharpening iron. Pitt Parade says, I don't know, he would still get to practice against Division I players every day. And when I talked to his father, I had a conversation with William Jeffers' father over the weekend. When did I talk to him? Sunday, maybe? Yeah, Sunday. And one of the things he talked about was, what can they do to get better? Practicing against high school players, it's not really going to help you get better that much because there might be one top guy for you to practice against. You go to a prep school, you might practice against 4 or 5 top guys. You go to college, you're going to practice against 14, 13, 12 Division I players every day. And you would still get that even if you redshirt. So you still have an opportunity to get better. That whole iron sharpens iron thing, and it's still a possibility for you to help improve and to help with development. You just got to sell him on it, that it's the best decision for him. But I mean, if you're coming out early, I don't know. I can't speak for William Jeffers or his family. I don't know what their thoughts are, what their intentions. I would assume that if they're going to graduate early, it's because they want to get to college and they want to play and they want to develop and move on, right? But that's going to be that'll be interesting. Now, I mean, there's a few steps between here and there. He's probably going to take some official visits to a couple of different schools, Pitt included, but a couple more schools than just Pitt, and then go and then make his decision and sign. And I mean, the first thing that has to happen is Pitt has to not offer him. Pitt has to get him and get his commitment and get him signed. They should be the favorite. They appear to be the favorite. I think everyone sort of assumes they're the favorite, but you need to actually get him on board and then see what you can do as far as his development. And who knows, maybe he comes in and he's ready to go. Maybe he's ready to play. But he's going to be a very young freshman coming in as a guy who reclassifies and jumps up a class as opposed to reclassifying and jumping back a class. All right, real quick, I got to talk. Panther-Lair.com. It's a website, Panther-Lair.com. You need to go to it, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. You can even see right there all those headlines. That's all football recruiting stuff that we've got up there at Panther-Lair.com. Then we got the pictures there of football. Of basketball. There's a lot going on all year round. There's football, basketball, and recruiting content that we have to pump out there, so you need to check it out. Pittsburgh.rivals.com, Panther-Lair.com, and of course message boards. So what we do here on the podcast, the live stream where we interact and we talk about Pitt sports all the time, or at least for an hour here on Tuesday nights, well, we do that on Panther-Lair.com all day, every day. So it's like this podcast, except you don't have to hear my voice or look at me. We can just interact and talk to each other and have the conversations about Pitt sports, whatever it is, all the time. Let's see. Max Dawson in the comments says, do you think Pitt football gets an on-campus stadium anytime soon? We're not going to go there yet, Max. We're going to take it. We're going to wait. We're not going to go there yet. We are going to talk a little bit of football stuff, and we appreciate everybody who is in the comments and questions about basketball. I really appreciate it. We're going to take a break from the basketball and flip over to the football and talk a little bit about football recruiting, because this is something I've been thinking a lot about. I wrote an article on Panther-Lair.com about it on Tuesday, earlier this morning. If you're checking this out now, it was earlier this morning on Tuesday that I put an article about the WPIAL for the recruiting class of 2021. And these are the guys who are juniors. Won't graduate for another year, won't sign with the school for another year. So there's a lot of time to go. But the WPIAL in the 2021 recruiting class is looking really, really strong. One of the stronger classes in quite some time. And I even just kind of looking at, state rankings and that kind of thing. I mean, you really go back quite a few years to find a class that was this strong. I mean, 2017 had some pretty good numbers. They had the 5-star in Lamont Wade. They had 4 4-stars. This is just in the WPIAL I'm talking about. Not even, WPIAL and City League. Not even expanding beyond that territory, though. I mean, WPIAL and City League, 2017 was a pretty strong class. 2014, they had 7 4-star prospects, and almost all of those guys were pretty good players. I mean, J.J. Costantino from Central Catholic probably shouldn't have been a 4-star prospect. Mike Grimm didn't pan out. Shai McKenzie, ran into some trouble when he was at Virginia Tech. But, I mean, you still had guys like Alex Buchser and I'm trying to blank on some of the other ones. But it was a very good class. I can bring it up now. I apologize. I just looked at these names earlier today, and I know Buchser was one. Who else was in the 2014 class? Computer's going slow, probably because I'm live streaming right now. But it turned out anyway. My point is this 2021 WPIAL recruiting class is looking. Monte Nicholson, Drayvon Henry, Alex Buchser, Chase Winovich. They were all 4-star prospects in the WPIAL. Yeah, they all worked out pretty well. This class, though, this year, I think has the potential to rival that group. That group ended up with 7 4-stars. They're not going to have 7 4-star prospects in the WPIAL this year, but they could end up with maybe 5. Right now, there's I think 3. There's 3 4-star prospects in the WPIAL right now. Derek Davis from Gateway, Elliot Donald from Central Catholic, and Nikai Johnson from West Mifflin. Those guys are 4-stars right now. And then you throw in guys like Dorian Ford from Baldwin, who's got legit offer sheet. You throw in Donovan McMillan. That's him right there on the screen. From where's he from? Peters. He's got a legit offer sheet. Khalil Dinkins from North Allegheny. He's a very good prospect. He's got good offers. And Stephon Hall from Central Valley is another guy with good offers. Aaron Gunn, an offensive lineman, has good offers. There's some really good prospects in the WPIAL this year. One of the better, I think it's shaping up to be one of the better classes that we've seen out of the WPIAL in quite some time. And I would say specifically defensive linemen. This is a big class for defensive linemen in the WPIAL. Elliot Donald, Nikai Johnson, Dorian Ford. Those 3 guys are studs. Johnson and Donald are already 4-star prospects. Ford has a real chance of getting there, I think, down the road, either at the end of the summer or maybe at the end of his senior year. I think Dorian Ford can end up as a 4-star prospect as well. And they're all right here in the WPIAL. And I looked back to 2006, 2005, somewhere around there. And this is the best class of defensive linemen in the WPIAL that I can find. I can't find another class of WPIAL defensive linemen that really compares to this. I mean, you had years where there was 1 or 2 here or there. Obviously, Dayon Hayes last year was the number 3 recruit in the state of Pennsylvania. 2017, Donovan Jeter and Kurt Heinisch were both in the top 11 in Pennsylvania. They're both D linemen out of the WPIAL. 2011, the 2 McKeesport kids, you remember these guys, Delvon Simmons and Brandon Jackson? I think they both went to Texas Tech. They were both in the top 10 nationally, top 10 in the state among overall prospects. Delvon Simmons was the number 1 recruit according to Rivals. And Jackson, I forget, was a little bit further down in the top 10. But, I mean, those 2 guys. 2006, I think, had a really good class in the WPIAL. John Malecki was number 12 recruit in Pennsylvania. Jason Pinkston was number 23. Justin Hargrove was number 33. That's 3 good defensive linemen all in the WPIAL, but they weren't ranked as highly as these 3 guys this year, where Elliot Donald's the number 4 or number 5 prospect in the state. Nikai Johnson is number 7. Dorian Ford is number 10. This is a stud defensive line class in the WPIAL this year. And I know the biggest concern with this coaching staff is its offensive recruiting, and they definitely have to step that up. They have to do a better job. They have to get, better recruits on offense and offensive linemen, and they have to get quarterbacks and all these things. But if you've got these kind of studs, defensive linemen in the WPIAL, you got to get them. You got to get as many of them as you can. They already have Nikai Johnson, so that's huge. Nikai Johnson is a big-time commitment for Pitt, and he was the first kid to commit in the class of 2021 for Pitt. He committed last June as part of that big commitment rush when Pitt was getting all those guys in the 2020 class. Nikai Johnson was like, I want to be a part of this as well. And it's huge to have him committed. And this was a big part of the article that I wrote on Tuesday morning on Panther-Lair.com. It's big to have Nikai Johnson committed because he is working on Elliott Donald and Dorian Ford. He's trying to get those guys to join him at Pitt. And it's not just him. It's also Deion Hayes, 4-star defensive end from Westinghouse. And I've talked before about this, that Hayes is a big-time recruiter for Pitt, that he's trying to work. I mean, he worked on Nikai Johnson before Nikai committed, and he's working on Elliott Donald, and he's working on Dorian Ford. They're trying to get these WPIAL guys to stay home. And this is something that I believe for a long time. Coaches can talk all they want about you need to put on for your city, you need to stay home and represent, you need to play for the local team, you need to help us build something here in your backyard and all that stuff. Coaches can say all that stuff they want. That's fine. But when other players are saying it, the impact is so much greater. And so when it's Nikai Johnson and it's Deion Hayes saying it, it means more than when it's Pat Narduzzi and Charlie Partridge and Corey Sanders saying it. It really does. And you're getting those two guys saying it. You know who else? You know who else is playing large in all of this conversation about guys in the WPIAL? And, recruits kind of everywhere, actually. Damar Hamlin and Paris Ford. Those two guys, the way they played last year and the fact that they're coming back, that both of them are coming back, that both of them chose to come back, both of them had a decision to make and they chose to come back, huge. You can't overvalue that. I don't think you can overstate the impact of those two guys and their decision to return to Pitt. Because it's making an impact. It's making an impact on, Deion Hayes, he already signed, but I definitely think it's weighing on guys like Elliott Donald and Dorian Ford. Nikai Johnson said it means a lot to him, even though he's already committed and he'll never play with those two guys. Those two guys will be gone before he gets here. But it means a lot to see local guys succeeding at the local school and then having a chance to go to the NFL and saying, no, we're coming back. It means something. And it's resonating also with other guys too. It's not just local kids who are being impacted by Damar Hamlin and Paris Ford. Kids watch highlights, they see Paris Ford, and Paris Ford's name is ringing out right now. It's ringing out with, a couple of weeks ago they had a bunch of recruits that visited from Philadelphia. It's ringing out with those guys. It was a big deal for those guys to meet Paris Ford. It's like, wow, Paris Ford. Oh, cool. What's up, man? It's just like it was to meet LaShawn McCoy back in the day, if you were a recruit coming to campus, or James Conner, or Kenny Pickett after the Miami game. And it's a big deal when you meet those guys that are doing what you want to do at the next level. And so it's, I think all of those things are playing into some of the recruiting momentum that Pitt has right now. But you swing it back around to Donald and Ford and Johnson, Pitt has to do well with those guys. They have to they've already got one, should get three, got to get two. And if they can get Elliott Donald, then that last name should ring a bell. That last name should be familiar. It is a relation. If they could get him, that's a big, big pickup. When you got this kind of talent in the WPIAL, you've got to have success with it. There's a question right up at the beginning. Josh Newark asked, and Josh, I appreciate you throwing all the questions in here. Said, Chris, would you comment on the fact that Partridge and Bates remain on this staff? And obviously Narduzzi made a strong statement via Michigan State. I got to believe Like deserves a ton of credit here. If you're talking about ponying up to keep those guys on staff, yeah. I wouldn't say specific. I wouldn't say any coaches specifically, but I do think Pitt had to pay. Pitt gave out some raises this offseason. Let's say that. All right, Pitt kept a few guys on staff, and they stepped up to keep those guys on staff. And you can guess who some of those guys are, and you probably be right if you made certain guesses about them. And I think it's obvious candidates. Maybe one or two that aren't so obvious. But yeah, Pitt stepped up to keep some of the coaches on staff this offseason. And it's Heather Like, and Heather Like being willing to do what needs to be done to keep the staff together. But it's also support from above. And I think we give a lot of credit to Heather Like, and we should. She deserves a lot of credit. She's, I think, taken the lead on a lot of important initiatives for this university, the athletic department, the football program, the basketball program. I think it's important what she's done, and I think she deserves a lot of credit for it. But you have to have support above there. The athletic director, the director of athletics can only do so much on their own. They've got to have someone above who says, okay, you can have this budget. And Heather Like has that. Pitt has that. Pitt Athletics has that in the chancellor, Patrick Gallagher. He signs off on these things. He's willing to give athletics that kind of support. And I think that's huge. You can't, again, you talk about things you can't overstate the importance of. I mean, that's a big one right there. Whether it comes to, whether or not Pat Narduzzi is going to pursue the Michigan State job, if Pitt's going to come up with more money to retain some of the assistants or increase the recruiting budget, any of the things that they've done, facilities upgrades, they've poured money into the football program over the last 5 years. 6 years. Well, 5 years. And they've done that because they had the okay from the chancellor to do it. The chancellor sets the tone here and really kind of creates the opportunity, creates the support. And that's a big part of it. Take a couple more questions out of the comment section here, which we really appreciate. Everybody who's chiming in, man, I really appreciate you on the comments with the questions and everything you have to say. 404 Strang says, do you think Pitt's offensive struggles in 2019 were due to the drastic change in the offensive philosophy? Only other team with such a drastic change was Georgia Tech. Follows up by saying, I don't think we had the personnel last year for a pass-first offense, but this year we will. Yes and no. Look, I think the biggest problem with the offense last season, aside from certain issues with blocking, I think the biggest problem with the offense last season was just, self-inflicted, correctable mistakes. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me use that phrase over and over and over and over and over again. And I'll continue to use that phrase over and over and over and over and over again until they perform at a certain level where that phrase is no longer applicable. Because you can't do the dumb things they did and get away with it and win more than 8 games. You can't have drop passes. You can't throw interceptions. You can't fumble. You can't have procedure penalties. You cut those things down. Not out completely. Every now and then you're going to throw a pick. Ball's going to get knocked out. Guy makes a perfect hit on the ball. It's going to get knocked out. You're going to fumble. You're not going to catch every pass. Might drop a pass here or there. Might jump off, false start, miss the cadence, mishear things. Just get itchy, jump. It's fine. It happens. It can't happen with the frequency and the volume that it happened in 2019, or else their offense is going to stink again. You know what I mean? The offense is going to shoot itself in the foot again if they have those issues at that level that they did last year. That to me was the biggest problem with the offense. You catch a little bit more of those passes, a few more of those passes. Look, I threw out some of the numbers. Pro Football Focus does an adjusted completion percentage for quarterbacks that takes into account dropped passes and throwaways and passes that are tipped at the line of scrimmage and all those kinds of things that really aren't the quarterback's fault. But still, if you just look at basic completion percentage, it's going to go down as an incomplete pass. Well, they have this adjusted completion percentage stat, and Kenny Pickett was like top 15, top 10 in the country in adjusted completion percentage. If these guys would have just caught the ball a little more than they did, this offense would have been a lot better. Probably would have won 10 games. I'm not going to blame every loss on dropped passes, because there's actually blame also for fumbles and interceptions and false starts and procedure penalties. We can blame those things too. And I think if you take all of those and just cut it down to a reasonable number, and really you could cut it, it was over 100 if you add all those things together. You could cut it in half and it would still be reasonable. I think it's reasonable to say that you only have 55 drop passes, interceptions, fumbles, and false procedure penalties. I think that's a reasonable number over a 13-game schedule. And if you got down to that number, they do win 10 games. I would almost guarantee it. So that's what they need to do, is just clean the thing up. Just be a little more accountable. Correct some of those mistakes. All right. Last question out here from Roman, of course. Regular on the podcast, man. I appreciate it. I really do. Chris, Pitt had minus 32 combined rushing yards between the two teams last spring game. Will they do better or worse this year? Pitt's spring games have been kind of unwatchable for years now. Pat Narduzzi is insistent on not giving anything away, not showing anything, and I don't see any reason why that would change this year. I imagine it'll be another slog fest. It'll be another unpleasant event to watch. But, that's what they do. I'll tell you what would be really interesting to me, though, those opening 3 games, Miami of Ohio and Richmond and Marshall, if they really do just open up with guns blazing in those games, to get this thing down, to get this, be more of a well-oiled machine than they have been in previous years, where they've tried to sort of inch their way into it and sneak in and not show anything. You need as much live action as you can get. And I think getting the live action bullets flying reps at full speed with as much of the playbook as you can is far more valuable than whatever advantage you get from hiding things in those first few games and not showing, all of your offense or anything like that. So if it's me, I think you should come out and try and hang 50 on all those first 3 opponents. And that's not to be critical of Miami or Richmond or Marshall. That's not to say that those teams should be, susceptible to getting 50 points hung on them. I'm just saying that you should come out there with the intention of doing that, to go out and absolutely light them up. And we're a long ways away from that, but you need to get that working. You need to get it done. And you need to be ready to go when the season really starts, so that you can have the kind of record and have the kind of season that you should have at this point. Scabaloni, I apologize. Scabaloni family says, what do you think Pitt's football record will be this upcoming season? I had a long rundown on that last week, and what do I think it will be? 8 or 9 wins. I don't know. I'm not going to go through the whole schedule again. We won't do that. Listen, I do want to ask you, though, before we head out, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you can keep up to date on all of our the live streams and the when these live streams go live, any new content we put out there. The subscribe button's out there. I'm not going to point to it because I'm not even sure where it is. I need to get it so it's on the screen so you can see it. And then I can point to it and point in the wrong direction. But, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That'll help us go. And I appreciate you joining in the comments and the questions here. Appreciate listening to the podcast. If you're just checking in on this one and catching the audio of it, I appreciate that as well. Check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Get yourself, am I on the screen with this? Here, Voodoo Ranger, Starship IPA. From New Belgium. That's the stuff. It's very good. I highly recommend it. Thanks for checking it out, though. I appreciate you guys checking out the live stream. Josh and Roman and Pit Parade and the family, 404 Strang, all you guys. We'll figure something out for next week's podcast. I'm not sure what we're going to do with the live stream yet. Maybe we'll just do a post-game live stream. I'm not sure. We'll see what the plan is between now and then. But thanks again. Make sure you tune in. Saturday morning, 93.7 The Fan, 8 a.m., the Panthers Insider Show. Check that out as well. It's kind of like this, except it's a radio show. It's on The Fan. And you can call in. So we can talk that way. So we like to, we have all these different ways to interact. And that's another one too, where you can just call in and talk to me directly and be like, man, you have no idea what you're talking about. You need to shut your mouth and find a new job. So, or you can say, hey, here's my thoughts on Pitt, and we can talk about that and probably have a more productive conversation out of it. Anyway, thanks for checking out the podcast. Thanks for checking out the live stream. Make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. And maybe next week we'll talk about on-campus stadiums. Darn, we just ran out of time. Didn't get it done this week. All right. Thanks again for checking it out. We will talk to you next Tuesday for the next Panther-Lair Show.